So we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us this evening. This is the first broadband conversation in a series of conversations. It's part of the Fox Island Broadband Task Force Community Broadband Campaign. And the goal of this campaign is to share broadband information, education, and options with our community. And our goal is to eventually reach community consensus to select and to fund a universal broadband solution for Vinyl Haven. On December 3rd, we launched the Community Broadband Campaign presentation of our 2020 broadband report. That report provides a high-level overview of Vinyl Haven's options for a universal broadband solution. Tonight's conversation is going to look at the benefits and challenges of one community's way to deliver universal broadband. And that way was a town or is a town-involved, partially publicly funded private incumbent provider model. That's a little bit of a mouthful, but we're going to learn a little bit more about that later. So my name is Gabe McPhail. I work in the Vinyl Haven Planning and Community Development Office, where I facilitate committee and town projects. I'm joined behind the scenes tonight by my colleague, Matt Jablonski. Hi, Matt, who is our Island Fellow, currently working for the town of Vinyl Haven. So before we get started, I want to remind everybody about our Zoom etiquette and Zoom protocols. So these are just a few tips and guidelines. We're probably all used to these by now after a long time on Zoom, well, at least since March for some of us. So first, please stay on mute unless you're speaking. It's helpful if you keep your video off. If you have something distracting going on, either whether you're doing something or there's something distracting going on behind you. We're also, oh yes, so *6 on the is mute on the phone. So if you're calling in and joining by phone, to mute and unmute, you use *6. You can, so just to get back to the phone, we know that some people can only join by phone, and there is a little bit of an irony here that we're doing all of these broadband conversations over the internet. So you have to have Zoom, or you have to be able to have an internet speed that can accommodate Zoom. So we know that some people don't. So if for some reason you're on with the video on Zoom and you need to call in, Matt is going to put the call-in number and the meeting ID in the chat. So if you happen to lose your connection and you want to get back into the Zoom room with a phone, but just by calling in on your phone, you can do that. So Matt will put that in the chat. And then the other thing you can do, if you would like, is to rename yourself if your Zoom name as it appears on the screen is not what you want to be called. So you just feel free to rename yourself, add anything else that you feel is relevant to the rest of the participants here tonight, maybe your affiliation if you want to add in your pronouns. So go ahead and do that. If you don't know how to do that, in your participants window where all of the names appear, just hover over your name. There's an option for you to rename yourself. So if you have any Zoom issues tonight while you're in the Zoom room with us, or any questions that are like tech questions, you can message Matt in the chat. And he's also going to put his email in the chat. So if you get bumped off for some reason, you can reach out to him via email, and he'll be keeping an eye on that. All right. The other thing we're going to ask you to do, just to keep things streamlined, is we're going to take advantage tonight of the Zoom chat feature and the Facebook comments feature. So Throughout the presentation, we just encourage you, as questions come up or as you have questions, to, if you're in the Zoom room, put those questions in the chat box. If you're watching on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comments. And so Matt is going to gather up all of those questions, and we'll make sure we have them for the end when we're doing the Q&A. We'll take the written questions first in the Q&A, and then as we move toward the close of the evening, we'll go to any verbal questions from folks on the phone who couldn't put things in the chat, or any other questions that come up that we're not able to get put in the chat. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that if you are listening tonight and you hear any like broadband jargon that you are not clear on, like, well, what does that mean? And we're going to try our best not to use jargon. And if we do use jargon, we'll try our best to remember to explain what that jargon means. But Matt is going to put another link in the chat for you. That's just a link to one broadband glossary that, if for some reason you're like, what does that mean? You can click on that link, and hopefully your word will be defined in that glossary. So I'd now like to introduce our speakers for the evening. Janann Sherman is a retired history professor. She's from Tennessee. Janann settled on the island in 2013, and 2 years later, she joined the Fox Island Broadband Task Force. And her goal was to really help assess current and future broadband needs and options for our community, which is what the task force continues to do today. So Janann is the chair of the Broadband Task Force. Christa Thorpe is joining us from Bremen. She's a community development officer at the Island Institute. At the Institute, she works to support the broadband team with community outreach and digital literacy programs. So Christa's joining us today wearing her resident of Bremen hat, so to speak. Bremen is a coastal fishing community that is south of Waldoboro. She serves as the chair for the Town of Bremen Broadband Initiative Committee, and that committee generated and carried out a plan to bring universal broadband to the community of Bremen. Also with us tonight is Town Manager Andy Dorr, and I believe we also have some members of our broadband task force joining us. Norbert Laser is with us, and I do believe that we'll have another member, Pat McCormick, who will also be joining us. So if you have any questions this evening that you want directed toward task force members, Norbert, or our town manager, Andy Dorr, just make sure you indicate that in the chat or the comments when you write your questions. So just a quick overview of our flow for tonight's event. I'm going to start off just by giving a brief bit of background to this whole process and the Broadband Task Force. Then we're going to move into the main part of our evening, which is our conversation with Christa. We're going to reintroduce the broadband speed test project that we talked about at our December 3rd meeting. I'll quickly share with you some of our next steps for our campaign process, and then we'll go to our Q&A. So to get us started tonight, we want to ask you a question that really aims at understanding what type of broadband solution people on Vinyl Haven are willing to support. So we're going to ask you to participate in a quick survey. Matt is going to put a link in the Zoom chat and also in the Facebook comments. So if you see that link, you'll want to click on it, and it's going to bring you to a poll. and you will see a poll question, which is, in choosing a broadband solution for Vinyl Haven, what is most important to you? So you'll see that poll link in the chat, and you'll just want to click on that. And you'll see the question, and you'll see the options. So you want to choose one of these options. Is it universal access, which essentially is a broadband connection to every home and location on the island? Is it local control? That's where our community would play a key role in making decisions. They might be decisions around monthly rates, possible subsidies, maintaining the infrastructure, any one of those things and more. Is it future-proof highest speed technology, which to us means fiber to the premise fiber optics, which essentially is the gold standard for internet. It's capable of 1 gig over 1 gig speeds. Is it lowest overall project cost for the taxpayer? Or is it the lowest price, probably monthly, for service? So the rate that you're paying for your service. So you want to choose one of those options, the one that is most important to you. So Matt is gonna share his screen with us, and we're gonna see what those polls look like, those poll answers. This is exciting. We're seeing universal access as being the primary factor that is most important to people who are taking this poll now. Very good. So that's kind of nice to see that we want an equitable solution to broadband. Local control is getting a lot of points there as well, which is also exciting to see. So I think this just really speaks to the island nature in a lot of ways. We're, very independent. We want to have that local control, but we also want to take care of each other, which to me, universal access really speaks to. So that's great. Thank you all. And feel free to keep participating. If you're on Facebook, we'd love to see more people taking this poll. The link will be there and the poll will be active. So thank you so much. So we're going to go to just giving a little background on the Fox Island Broadband Task Force and our process for the work that the committee has done. So we are a 9-member committee, and as I mentioned, Janann is the board chair. This committee was formed by the town in 2015 after the publication of a broadband feasibility study, which is called the Tyson study, or the Tilson study, or the Tilson report, which is available on the broadband page on the town website. And it really was it's a feasibility study that was commissioned by the Island Institute for several Maine islands, including Vinyl Haven. So that really prompted the formation of the task force. And you see the task force's mission here. And really the goal is, several of those things that we were doing the poll on, this idea of universal access, things being affordable, things being future-proof. So really to find that solution for Vinyl Haven. So over the years, as the committee has done its work and learned more and investigated more about what broadband options in different communities look like, these are essentially the goals the committee has settled on as being paramount. Why we need broadband It's about education. It's about sustainable economic development. It's about the ability to have telemedicine. It's about equal access for everybody. Again, that's the universal broadband. The speed and reliability and future-proof technology and symmetrical service are all related to that high-speed fiber optic fiber to the premise system. So all the work that has been done up to 2019 led to the town commissioning or soliciting an RFP to do a report that really looked at what a Vinyl Haven owning our own broadband system would look like. And that's essentially what is contained in the 2020 broadband report, which is what our presentation on December 3rd was all about. And that is available to view if you missed it on the town's Facebook page. And I will, excuse me, on the town's Facebook page, as well as on the town's YouTube channel. Both of those links are available on the homepage of the town website. And I will also mention that this presentation and conversation will also be available on both those platforms. Facebook, you can watch it later. Town YouTube channel, you'll be able to watch it later. So the broadband report was really just like giving us this very high level overview of cost for owning our own broadband network, and is really what prompted us to take this next step of doing a community campaign. And through education, outreach, digital literacy, training, we really want to affirm what our community's values are and then decide on the broadband solution we want to commit to. Our goal is to move forward this spring, late spring, pursuing funding for broadband infrastructure. That is the ultimate goal. So we're going to move into our conversation for tonight. But before we do, I just want to give a tiny bit of background on Bremen and why we're looking at Bremen as a case study for helping us in our broadband conversations and the decisions we want to make around broadband. So Bremen is a small rural community. It's bordered by Waldoboro and Damerscott. It has a population of around 800, and there are about 400 homes or locations that would require a broadband connection, or that will require a broadband connection in Bremen. One of the other things that is similar is their industry. So much like Vinyl Haven, they have an economy that's based on fishing and tourism. And every community that's pursuing broadband or has pursued broadband has a different broadband story, and Bremen is no different. The model that they chose to go with is a private incumbent, so that's their provider that was already there in the community, working with their town, and that is definitely one of the options that we need to consider as we move forward. So in this conversation, Christa is going to highlight the challenges that Bremen's Broadband Committee encountered in their process, as well as with the private ownership model. But there are definitely benefits to the private ownership model as well. And there are a lot of positives that came out of their process. So with that, I am going to turn things over to Janann and Christa.
Like Gabe said earlier, I do work at Island Institute. I came to the organization with more of an education focus and education background, but also am involved in the broadband and specifically digital literacy work. But here in Bremen, I am on the school committee and have been involved at the in town things enough for a while so that when people in the community started started talking to one another about, this ongoing problem of over 2/3 of the town really not being able to get anything better than 3 megabits per second download DSL, and never even a megabit upload. So that's way below the modern standard of broadband. There was basically some word of mouth connections through the librarian, which helped us find one another. Just some residents of the community came together and started meeting at the library in early 2019. One person was a retiree who had moved to the community and heard on NPR that lack of broadband was keeping Maine communities from being able to keep their young folks or have working people move into the community. And he thought that was something of concern in the community that he's been part of for many years. And then a couple of us school committee members felt very passionate about the need for our school kids to have access to internet. One of our member working group is a telecommuter who works for Cisco, software developer, and he cannot do his work from home. He has to drive into Scotta and rent an additional space. So, basically there was just a sense that this was a wider spread issue than just these few people. And so we dove into a process of trying to figure out how widespread the issue in fact was. And I'm just going to check really quick. Do we have Janann back on?
Not yet, Christa. Yeah, she's still.
I think I'm
I'll just
back.
forward you.
Okay, great. Okay.
Nice.
Sorry. I love these technical glitches because they're a great demonstration.
Perfect example.
Yeah, they're always a good demonstration of these either technological failures or need for broadband. So, and just an FYI, Christa, I'm going to mention too that your broadband or your internet isn't so great, hence the need for Bremen's effort for broadband. So if we lose Christa, she'll pop back on or she'll join us by phone. Okay,
Yeah,
so Janann, I'm not sure if you were able to hear Christa
Yeah, I was.
giving us some background. So, okay, great. Well, I'll turn it back over to you guys, and thank you so much, everybody watching, just for bearing with us as we move through those challenges.
Well, hello, Christa. I'm here at least temporarily, so glad to meet up with you. What's particularly interesting to us is the fact that you have made a partnership with a private entity, because we've been considering what's our best option, which is whether to build it as a town, as a public utility, or whether we should partner with an incumbent. And so that's a part of the story I'm particularly interested in. How did you decide that that was what you were going to do?
Yeah, so there is only one incumbent internet service provider in Bremen, and that's Tidewater Telecom, also known as LCI, Lincolnville Communications. It's a family of companies. And the decision, we did not come to the decision right away. In early 2019, the working group came together and was really interested in the municipal ownership model and learning more about that, and finding out what it would take for our little town to create a utility and be able to really bring that universal access. But before we got into the nitty-gritties, we just came up with one goal as a committee. We felt like it was really important to have a very clear goal, and that was to bring future-proof, high-speed internet to all residents of Bremen. Just we made it simple. And so then we were able to kind of start exploring options of what would get us there the fastest. So the incumbent internet service provider, Tidewater Telecom, it was kind of ahead of it in the 90s when they put in the DSL, and the whole town got that. But then in 2008, they were able to get a grant from ConnectME to do a small portion of town to build out a fiber optic network. So about 200 residences have fiber optic and 400 are without. And so basically, going back to your question, we chose to work with our incumbent, but it took a while to get to that decision. And that was partly because these 400 homes that lacked broadband were so frustrated with their high bills and their slow speed that had been going on for many, many years, that there was really a lack of trust in the company when we got started. And I think that what was unique about this telecom provider is that as soon as they knew that there was community interest, that there was enough community interest, which the committee helped drum up pretty quickly in those early days, just by having, newspaper stories, emails about what we were up to. The internet service provider, Tidewater Telecom, came to the table pretty much right away and presented to the select board the idea of working in partnership with the committee and the town to apply for ConnectME infrastructure grant funding for a project that would be mainly funded through their private company, get a portion from ConnectME, and they were asking Bremen for a portion as well, to build out a network that would be completely owned by Tidewater, but it would be fiber optic internet to every home in Bremen. So we pushed back on the town contributing money to the project, which we knew could kind of jeopardize our chance of having a successful grant. But at that point, the community members, again, had a little bit of trust issues with this company and didn't, already felt like they were paying these high monthly bills and didn't want to also see taxpayer money go to subsidizing a private network. And Tidewater came back and responded to our concerns and took that money off the table and said, okay, we'll find other ways for you to contribute to this project. And it was just, months and months of really close conversations with Tidewater Telecom that reestablished the trust between the community and the provider, so that by the time we submitted a grant, which was about a year after the committee had really started working together, we had a very strong application, and it's a completely, again, a private model, but a public-private partnership in the sense that I don't think the grant application would have been successful if it weren't for that deep level of community involvement in the whole process.
So I keep going back to this what is the town's role in this model now that you have, or you're about to have, this private company all ready to roll, and they've made some promises? Do you have ways to hold their feet to the fire to make them be responsible to what the town set out to accomplish with this?
Right. Yeah, that was always the concern of the committee and the select board in going for this public-private partnership, was that there weren't really very strong accountability tools, such as with a cable company, you might have a franchise agreement and you could try to work some accountability into that. And then of course, if it's a publicly owned system, then there's a lot of accountability there. But the way that we were able to kind of feel comfortable with the level of accountability is actually the fact that we did apply for a ConnectME grant jointly with Tidewater, so that both the town and the company are on the application. And there were a lot of strong statements made in that application about the goals and the partnership between the company and the community, and a commitment to affordability, which is an issue for sure with any fiber network. You'll see that those monthly prices are not affordable for everyone. So Tidewater committed to having a subsidy program. And although we don't have a contract directly with Tidewater, but when we applied for that ConnectME grant, ConnectME does provide a contract. Tidewater has to meet the expectations of the grant they have to build out the network within 1 year of receiving the grant funding, which accounted for about 20% of the total project cost, was what was given by ConnectME. And even though that contract mostly just talks about the timeline in which they have to complete the project, there's a very strong public record of what this company and community committed to together, so that the committee kind of felt like our accountability tool is the publicity and the potential for either very positive or negative PR. So that we can refer back to that application, we can refer back to the commitments that Tidewater made jointly with the town. But it continues to be our concern.
You have a written record of what they've promised, at least to that point. And bad publicity is a very strong tool, especially for a regional company like that, who aspires to cover a larger region. I want to go back
especially with.
Yeah.
Or I'll just say, sorry, I know that I have a delay, especially with the additional ConnectME funding that is now available through the bond vote of last summer. And we know that that was just kind of the beginning of a lot more opportunities for public funding for broadband. I mean, nationwide, we know COVID has made this, even more pressing an issue. And so I think that right now, kind of being aware of the ways that public funding and companies wanting to be able to access that, that can be leveraged by a community to make that, hold that company to a bit of a more level of accountability.
I'd like to go back to the idea of when you began. I mean, as we start to talk about it, it sounds like, well, a handful of people were very much in favor of this, and we had a partner wanting to work with us, so we ran with it. But what were the objections to people? I mean, there's always people who are not in favor of this. What did they have to say? What were their objections?
Yeah, on the community-wide survey, there were certainly some folks for whom that level of DSL is sufficient. They say, I don't get it. I have internet. Why are you making an issue of this? And that might be someone who uses their internet to check email. And if they have to download a file, they go mow the lawn while it's downloading and come back. And but that doesn't work for telecommuters, for school kids, we have some local health care providers who were able to provide appointments through telehealth early in the pandemic. And so the objection around why do we need this was really addressed by the committee having community forums like this and having community voices explain just how pressing this was for their livelihoods, for their children's schooling, bringing those voices front and center to the whole process. And then the other objection was really, why would the public, why would the town be getting involved in an issue that is a private enterprise? Really seeing the internet, it's that existential question of, is the internet a utility, which it's not officially yet, or is it, a private service that's just up to the company and the customer to work out between themselves? And I think that one we also addressed, just through the many stories of Bremen residents who had been trying to work it out on an individual customer basis for years, getting nowhere. And this sense that it becomes a public issue when it's affecting the equality of education that kids are able to get, or the opportunity to participate in the modern economy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people who don't really realize the possibilities because they've never had them. And they're fairly satisfied then with a minimum amount until they start looking. And I think that this whole pandemic has really raised everybody's awareness about how we're so cut off, we're so isolated, even more so when you don't have the internet. You can't keep contact with friends, and students can't do homework or takes classes from home and so forth. So, well, my next question was about the expense, but it sounds like, see if I've got this right, what the town came up with was the ConnectME grant. I mean, they had the ability to get the grant that the private enterprise couldn't do. And so they contributed that, and then the private company did the rest of it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd say it's debatable whether the company could have gotten the grant on their own. They would have gone ahead and applied, but they admitted that it wouldn't have been as strong and may not have, especially in these coming years, because this issue has become so big. There's a lot of competition for this funding, and ConnectME continues to prioritize the projects that have that really strong demonstration of partnership with the public, the public-private partnership, or if it's just a public model, just whichever applications show real community support. And that's partly because that will lead to higher returns. You know, if more people are involved in the process, more people are likely to actually subscribe to the service once it's available.
Exactly.
So that makes sense. But yeah, I think you know, this particular, you know, when I look back on our process and your questions about accountability and ownership, you know, Bremen would not, I think, have been so confident in going ahead and tying ourselves together more closely with a private company, were it not that this particular seemed very invested in the community. It's a local company. The headquarters are the next town over. We have Bremen residents who work for the company, so you know, we know that it's an important employer in our community. That's not the case with all of the internet service providers in Maine. I know that there are some that are just bigger enterprises that don't show up to town meetings. I mean, the representative from Tidewater Telecom was at every broadband committee meeting we asked him to be at. He wrote long responses to every one of our questions, which went back and forth, like I said, for months. So that level of trust was really what made us feel like we could go ahead and sign our name on that application as a joint application.
I wanted to get at this issue of community support. I know that that's absolutely critical to getting the ConnectME grant. How did you demonstrate that? First of all, how did you find it out that you had community support? But how did you demonstrate it that was overwhelmingly in favor of going ahead?
Yeah, the community survey is an important piece that any community applying for ConnectME funding should get started on well before you even start the application. So through the survey, we were able to ask a couple specific questions about satisfaction with current internet service, but then we also asked directly on the survey, would you support the town jointly applying for ConnectME funding with Tidewater Telecom to build out this service. We wanted to really gauge, how people felt about the company by the time we had gone through putting out a lot of written information. I think that helped to get community support as well. Was just the Lincoln County News reported every broadband committee meeting and select board meeting that had to do with this proposal from Tidewater Telecom. We posted things on the website. We were very transparent right from the start of the process. So I think just as you are doing right now, everybody kind of feels what was going on and knew that it was being led by Bremen residents, not by the outside force. Was a helpful part of gaining community support. But then as far as demonstrating it on the application, we were able to use all those, yes, I support the project numbers from the survey. And in addition to that, in a normal year, you would go around door to door and have people sign a petition, and you would add numbers to your application. We had to do phone calls instead, and we had these long lists of Bremen phone numbers, and we just called residents after residents and had conversations, which were really, really interesting to meet more of our neighbors that way. And then I think the strongest part of our application was actually the letters of support that were written by community members, just a really diverse group of about 38. We collected detailed letters that talked about what broadband would mean to that household, to that individual. We had kids write letters, we had teachers, doctors, retirees, grandparents, business, the few businesses that we have in town. These letters really demonstrated the breadth of character of the community. And I think that the fact that each committee member reached out personally to their kind of list of community members that they felt could be strong spokespersons for Bremen made those letters stronger than maybe the average application. So we felt proud of that aspect.
Yeah, it sounds like a very good strategy. To anybody who's looking at these applications, to hear the voices of individuals and what it means to them, I think is really powerful. So you now are building it, right? I mean, it's being constructed, or you're hoping to, given the pandemic and all the rest of it.
The transmission fiber is being strung right now. So that's the fiber that is going down the roads, but they won't start connecting individual homes until the spring probably, or at least a couple months from now. And Tidewater was held up slightly by another huge initiative that came out with the CARES Act funding, the Connect the Kids. So they were able to connect 300 school kids' homes in their Lincolnville area. And so Bremen said, okay, if it's 300 school kids, we'll wait a little bit longer. But we are antsy and looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Once the decision is made, you want it now. Has any discussion been made about what they're going to charge? I mean, in terms of affordability, did you have anything to say about how they were going to do that in their business model?
Yeah, and a similar question just popped up in the chat of the speeds. So the speeds that we are being offered are the base one is 50 megabits per second download over 10 megabits per second upload for $69.95, so $70 a month, and that includes the landline phone with long distance, which was a sticking point throughout the process because a lot of people, well, half of Bremen has no cell service from any company, so they're fine having to pay for a landline. But a lot of Bremen residents don't want a landline, they use cell phones. And because this service is being provided by our telecom provider, FCC requires that they provide a phone infrastructure, at least to every home. So they're putting that cost on the customer. So basically this company would be charging $50 a month, $49.99 for the 50 meg service in communities where they're not the telecom provider, but because it's Bremen, we kind of got stuck with the phone. So $70 for 50 megabits and 90, so no, I guess 80, it's 10 or $15 more for 100 megabits per second download over 20. They do offer symmetrical, so that would be 50 over 50 or 100 over 100, which is important to some of the teleworkers in Bremen, especially the software guys and gals. And so that service is about $5 or $10 more than the asymmetrical, the 50 over 10. But basically we're looking at, an average, Bremen residents are going to be spending $85 to $100 a month with all the fees for their broadband service. And again, we don't think that's affordable to everyone. And so Tidewater does have a way for families who have kids on free or reduced lunch, and for, I believe, seniors on fixed Social Security income to be able to apply for subsidies and do a $25 a month option. But because it hasn't been built out yet, that's one of the points that the town is really going to be paying close attention to, is whether residents are really able to access that. And we get that the company they're putting up a huge amount of investment initially. We get that. And so if the town needs to step in and work something into the general assistance models we already have in order to be able to help residents afford it, the committee is going to stay focused on, making sure we have something in place for affordability.
Well, I noticed that we're kind of running long on time. I've been waiting for Gabe to interrupt and say, okay, your time is running out. I just like to know a general question. If you had to do this over again, what would you do differently?
I think that probably like you're doing, it's not something I could have changed, but if we had a little bit more time and had time to really lay out what a municipal ownership model could look like for Bremen, and we're able to compare that to and really do a direct pros and cons comparison of that public ownership versus working with a private incumbent server. I think that it would have been really great to be able to provide more of that education to the community and feel like we were making a decision based on all of that information. We were lucky that our provider came to the table right away and won this project. It was them, we get that, but I don't feel like in the end we had all of the information in front of us that we could have used to make a decision. On the other hand, I'm glad that it happened quickly. Because
there's something to be said for that too. Well, this has been really helpful. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners have too. And I want to stop my talking and go to some questions that people are asking.
Yeah, thanks so much, both of you. I really appreciate, Christa, your time, and I know you're on vacation this week, so thank you especially for taking time this evening to join us. I feel like there's so much in every community story that is beneficial to our process and what we are thinking through. But this is I think very relevant to us because we have a telecom, Consolidated Communications, who have provided us with a high level estimate for a build out. So there is opportunity there for possibly working with an incumbent. So knowing what that looks like now, not to say that Consolidated is going to pay for the build out as Tidewater is paying the majority of the build out for your community, but it's definitely interesting to listen to your story and take lessons away from that and apply them, especially I think in the community process and around how essential the community process is, especially to the ConnectME grants. So thank you both. I was going to take this time to do a recap of the broadband speed test, but I'm going to instead just do a quick, I think actually, Matt, if you can work with me, Matt, would you do a quick screen share of the town website so we can just show people how to get to taking the speed test? So what this is the Maine Broadband Coalition's project to map actual internet speeds. And if you go to the town website and you see this get up to speed, it's time to take the speed test, that's right on the home page. Just click on that and you're going to be taken to sort of a general deposit of our broadband campaign information. But if you scroll down, that it shows you kind of like how you can get involved in the broadband campaign. And the first item on that list is to take the speed test. And you just click on that link. It's going to bring you to the speed test website. You scroll down to the bottom. There's a link right there. You just click on that button and you're taken through some prompts. You fill out the prompts and the speed test runs automatically. And then you just close out of the box after the speed test runs. Your data gets logged and it eventually will end up on a map for Maine, where you can see all of the speeds that people have logged in. And so what our goal is to have Vinyl Haven covered in dots. So speaking of broadband speeds, I'll get this up on the screen, but we'll see what Vinyl Haven is looking like now. And it'll load, and it's in good time here. Always good examples of why higher speeds are more helpful, especially in this process. So you can see there's some folks who have taken the speed test already. The key over on the top left will show what speeds people are logging when they do the test. So we encourage you, whether or not you are getting service or not, you can still take this. If you're like, I can't get broadband at where I live, it's like, that's okay. You know, you can still, if you have a way to use your, your phone through data to get online, you can still take the speed test. It's really to show sort of underserved and served. And why this data is really important is because what we usually see now for served and underserved areas is what the providers tell us, and that's what they are offering for sale. So if they sell you something, that's what gets logged as this is the speed. But this is helping us see what people are actually getting. So we encourage you to take those steps and move through the speed test process and be able to get your speeds on that map. So I'm just going to real quick, I want to share where we're at and how we're moving forward. So really, we see as a committee, we see that there's essentially two options for Vinyl Haven. So this idea of the town-owned, sort of building your own system, or there's some sort of public-private partnership with an incumbent. So, you know, there may be different configurations of those two models, but that's essentially sort of what Vinyl Haven is looking at. And we're through this campaign, we're gauging which goals are most important to the community. And those goals will dictate essentially which option the town/community wants to support. So the steps we're taking now through outreach and education through this campaign are really to bring us to a point where we can have community consensus to get to that fiber to the premise broadband solution. And I think, you know, this is the time. It may not have been the time for Vinyl Haven 3 or 4 years ago because people were satisfied with enough people were satisfied with the incumbents, and there was enough going on that it wasn't as much on the forefront as COVID has made it today. So we now know, like, now is the time, and really, if not now, then when. So with that, we are going to move to questions. So I just want to encourage folks, if you haven't already put your questions in either the Facebook comments, if you're joining us on Facebook, or in the Zoom chat, if you're in the Zoom room with us, please do that. We are going to take a look at those questions and get to some answers. So I will check out some of these questions. So I think I want to go to, there's sort of a few questions about the ConnectME grant, and some of them are related to Vinyl Haven applying for ConnectME grants, you know, and also wondering, it sounds like sort of the challenge of completing the ConnectME grants. And I'd like to share just a tiny bit of information that that I have around the ConnectME grants, and then Christa, I know from both your own experience and then you know, through the Institute, you have your own information for the ConnectME grant. So just to start off, I'll say that it, Maine did just vote for, or this past year, to put $15 million toward broadband, and those are infrastructure grants through the ConnectME authority. And so those are the ConnectME grants. And I know Christa probably has, or members of her team have, but I've been involved in the public information hearings that are sort of discerning and deciding what the application criteria will be for those grants, and really to help formulate those grant, sort of the grant and / funding criteria. So I know that there's going to be a first round of infrastructure grants coming up in the new year, and I think they're going to be doing 2 cycles of those. So there are ConnectME planning grants, which essentially Vinyl Haven could apply for, but we're sort of past those planning grants, and we're now ready to make a decision and move into an infrastructure grant. So can you share with us, Christa, you know, the level of technical expertise required for the ConnectME grants, and, you know, is it something, you know, you need to hire someone to do, or is it something that's more probably less stringent than the USDA grants? But will you share your experience with us?
Yeah, absolutely right about less involved than those federal grants, which I know are big lifts for communities. But the Maine one, they don't want the application to be too long. They're going through a lot of these, and they have a small board, and like everything in Maine, there's limited capacity. But the part of the application, so as far as the text and the narrative, you know, dedicated community members can do a lot on a volunteer basis to fill out the narrative portions of the ConnectME grants, that again really get at the community that's applying and the process that you went through. A lot of it is just documenting that, but there is this whole you know, provide the design, the engineering, the specifics, the technical side of the grant application, which we could not have done without Tidewater did all of that. So that is a benefit to working with a company that isn't going to charge you to fill in all of that design information. But a lot of communities, that said, a lot of communities that have gone with a public model have gotten planning grants to use a consultant to help, who has the knowledge needed, the technical expertise to fill out those design specification sections of the application. And so you could pay a consultant to help with that portion. But what's great about the ConnectME grant is they do feel accessible even to small communities in Maine.
Great, thank you. We did get another question that's related. That's again directed Vinyl Haven specific. So when does Vinyl Haven intend to apply? So that's essentially what this campaign is leading up to, is to be able to access these infrastructure grants through ConnectME. Now, we need to keep in mind that they only work for areas that are underserved or unserved. So Christa can tell us the definitions of those. Would you mind doing that, Christa?
Yeah, I'm looking at your map. It looks like a lot of Vinyl Haven would, or the speed test map looks like you'd qualify. Unserved is, well, I think that they're kind of grouping those together at this point, but broadband is 25 megabits per second over download speed over and 3 megabits per second upload. Although the state of Maine, and I hope none of my Island Institute broadband colleagues are watching, because I can't remember whether the state of Maine might make that 5 upload, but either way, really the speeds that you are actually able to get. And so ConnectME knows that the companies provide their for sale speeds, as Gabe said. It's, Spectrum does provide 100, but is that actually what a community is able to get? It depends. One of the technical things with cable infrastructure is if they're not using a fiber to the home, a fiber to the premise, the house at the end of the road will have slower speed than the house at the beginning of the road. So even if they're offering that 100, whoever it is, by the time it reaches the end of the road, and a lot of users are using up the juice in the meantime, you're not necessarily getting that. That's I was an English teacher before this job, so that's the best I can do on the technical side. But yeah, so 25 megabits per second. So take that speed test, and if you're not getting that for download, you are unserved, underserved, and will it be able to qualify for a Connect Maine grant?
And I think for folks who are sort of interested in which portions of the island would qualify with the information that we have now would qualify for grants, I strongly encourage you to go to the town website. You can click on that same speed test image that Matt showed us, and that brings you to that general page, and you'll see a link to the broadband report that we just did. And that really walks through a broadband build out in phases and indicates which areas of the island would be eligible for ConnectME funding. So you'll get to see certainly the north end of the island is the most in need, and that is definitely a fundable part of the island. Where it gets less or likely unable to use ConnectME money is in the Spectrum served area. So hopefully that answers that question. We don't know essentially what I think we don't know yet what the deadlines for the ConnectME grants are, but our campaign cycle, just so folks know, we're working with Christa's colleague, Kendra Jo Grindle, who was on our last conversation call. So Kendra's sort of guiding us through timelines, keeping us on track with our process so we can apply for that second round of infrastructure grants. So if we move forward in this process, make a decision as a community, are able to procure levels of funding that we need in order to apply for the grant, we need to show match in the areas that are required, then we can hopefully meet that second round timeline. So just moving on, I was wondering, Janann, there's a question about, again, we can direct folks to the broadband report, which I strongly want to do, but Janann or Pat or Norbert, because I know you're all on the call, someone is wondering, in our proposed model that we put in our report, what speeds do that proposed model offer to the consumer? Sort of what are these packages? Sort of, is it the 50 over 10? Is it, 100 over 25? What is it that those, the proposed rate structure looks like? And please remember, everyone, this is just theoretical. If we own our own system, it's really finding something that the customer wants and needs that still sustains the model, but is also competitive. And as Christa pointed out, what is sort of affordable to the community, and how do you make all that work? So, Janann.
Yeah, I'm thinking about in the report that Axiom did. They talked about possibilities, various plans, and what they would likely to be costs and so forth, but they are theoretical at this point. And with fiber to the premise, you do have the ability to offer all the way up to a gigabyte. So it's very flexible, and it's going to depend on who ends up running it and who decides what we have to have in order to make this a viable project. I mean, there's just an awful lot of moving pieces in it right now, but it's definitely going to be faster than anything that's available from an incumbent.
Thanks, Janann. So I'm gonna hopefully, I think, just do one last of the written question before we open it up to any folks on the phone or someone who didn't get a chance to post a question. There are additional questions that we're not going to get to tonight. We're going to roll them into our next conversation, and I will talk about that before we close tonight. But I want to thank everybody for the really great questions we have coming in tonight. So I don't know if Andy is on the call. Andy Dorr, are you on the call? I don't have my full screen up to know.
I'm here.
All right. So someone is asking about our franchise agreement with Spectrum. So can you share a little bit with us about, what that franchise agreement maybe looks like, or, sort of the general question, like, yeah, do we have a franchise agreement with Spectrum, and maybe a little bit of what that looks like?
Sure. So this is up for renewal, and based on questions I've asked before, it's catered toward the TV or cable services, not, this is the response we got from Spectrum, not for broadband services.
Great. Thank you so much. So I want to open it up to anyone. I don't think we have anyone joining by phone, but is there anyone who is joining us in the Zoom room who hasn't had a chance to ask a question or just make a comment? Just real quick, we just have a tiny bit of time left, but is there anybody who would like to jump in? Feel free to just either raise your virtual hand if you know how to do that, or just unmute yourself and go ahead and maybe identify yourself and start speaking.
Gabe, it's Jeff Aronson. Can I ask a question?
Certainly, Jeff.
Hi.
Hi.
To the committee members, have you surveyed the range of professional career work needs, education needs? Do we have numbers and lists of who's involved in terms of these needs and what their needs are? Do we have some descriptive statements that would be helpful for applications in the future?
So I'm gonna say one thing, and then I'm gonna pass it to Janann. But so, because I think she has some information from a past survey. So there was a survey done a couple years ago. Yeah, 2018. Yeah. However, we, especially for this the funding opportunity through ConnectME, we will be, I think we're looking at February, doing another community survey. So likely it will be structured to include that information, but I'm going to turn that question over to Janann as well.
Well, I'll just second what Gabe said. What we did in 2018 was a satisfaction survey. We were trying to see who was satisfied with what they had and whether or not there was ever a chance to do anything beyond what the incumbents were willing to do on the island. So that was almost strictly satisfaction. This new survey will be very targeted to the kind of information we have to have for these grants. And we'll be going after several grants, not just the ConnectME.
So Gabe, may I ask a follow-up?
Certainly. Yep, real quick. Thank you.
So a recommendation, I remember the satisfaction survey. I remember talking about it with people who don't do surveys here, but whose needs could be articulated effectively. The survey may not be it may be a very effective way in terms of resources, but it may not be as effective a way of targeting certain groups and having, I'd be willing to volunteer certainly, but having volunteers actually go to those individuals or those small operations, so many self-employed people here on the water and off the water, to help them comprehend what their needs might be, because they may not be able to articulate it in a manner other than, I don't do this because it's too slow.
Great. Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
I definitely think in this campaign, one of the things the committee has talked about is the various ways to reach out and reach people. So we appreciate that, and we'll definitely take it to heart.
I'd like to talk with you, Jeff, more about that at some point.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
A perfect example was the class you helped me with this summer.
Exactly. Oh, what a nightmare.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, so so for just the 1 minute or so we have left, I just want to bring our contact information back up on the screen in case folks want to reach me or Janann or Christa. Our emails are right up there. And then please do go to the town website. Just click on that broadband speed test image and you'll get to that page that has the broadband report. And we really encourage folks to take a look at that. It's a good high level but comprehensive view of sort of what our options are. And it'll give you a sense of really, you know, some detail in some areas, and just looking at what the model would look like for owning our own infrastructure. So I want to thank you all. Much thanks to Christa and to Janann for you know, being here tonight and hosting this conversation. And thanks to all who joined in the Zoom room. Thanks to everybody who participated via Facebook. And please do reach out to us individually afterwards by email if you have questions or comments. And then we ask you to save the date for our next conversation. So there will be a conversation on January 20th, and we're going to line up. It will either be a conversation with Consolidated, or it will be a conversation with Islesboro regarding the system that they chose to build, which is their community-owned system. So you just look for information on that. We'll be posting it on Facebook, through the town website, in the wind, but January 20th is save the date. So with that, I just want to thank you all one more time and wish you a very happy new year. So thank you all for joining us.